Hello again, Michael Ware with the Iowa Firearms Coalition, and I'm just going to hit you right in the face with it. I'll bet that you thought that Jim Crow was dead. Think again. Tonight we've got Narren Brown with us. I'm glad that you came on. I'd like for you to introduce yourself to our guests, or for everybody out there in YouTube land. Go ahead.
Well, Michael, thank you for the invitation. My name is Narren Brown. I'm the president and founder of an apparel company called the wellarmedprogressive.com. We do social media posts that are either homesteader, funny, or politically focused. And we also do events where we try to train folks about proper firearm safety and storage. Most recent event we did, we provided to folks in Iowa, both the Iowa permit to carry class and the Minnesota permit to carry class. Okay. And in total, we had about 25 participants over the 2-day event for the class, and another 10 or 15 folks that showed up just to kind of shoot at the range with us.
Yeah. Was that down there at Crossroads?
It was down at Crossroads. They've been good to us. They're a very gracious hosts. They like this last event we got down there it was a Saturday, and we started at like 4:30, and they normally close at 6, but we had the range from 4 to 8. So everybody had a good time. So
I'm glad. Well, I tell you, you and I were hooked up together by a third party. I'm glad that he set us up. I've got to tell you, this stuff weighs heavily on my mind. But I wanted to approach some of these topics that we have at IFC differently. And the reason why is, and I want everybody to understand that I don't want this to be perceived as some sort of identity politics play. That's not what's going on here. But I'm telling you, it's hard for me to have a conversation. It doesn't matter whether it's truth or not anymore. It's hard for me to have a conversation as a white middle-aged man and then talk about some of the topics we're talking about and have them actually lend or have credibility. So I think this is very important when I can talk with somebody that has a perspective that I don't have or that I can't have as much as I try to understand. And so I'd like to have people on to visit about what their experiences are and what they see, and to offer validity or validate what my thinking is. And so with that, I'd like to offer you the idea, and then we can discuss it and chase it. That it's my firm opinion that Jim Crow's alive and well. And when we talk about Jim Crow, what I should mention for everybody watching is the idea that there is the issue or the idea of control. Somebody putting their thumb on others for the purposes of making sure that they behave or they're not problems for them. So whether that be politicians, through law enforcement, legislature, governors, whatever it may be, but I would just call it the political class. And I'm telling you that I see that every day. Now, the way that I believe that that's manifesting itself, primarily for the Second Amendment conversation, are through the laws that I see offered or put in place that basically create different classes. Okay, so that usually manifests itself as you've got a poor class of people, then you've got everybody else. And an example of that would be, right off the top of my head would be, okay, the HR 127, is that the one that's been floated around the federal government that's so egregious, that creates the $800 tax on each gun and that kind of thing? Are you familiar with that one, Narren?
Not.
It's been everywhere, and so it's been hotly debated. Let me give you one of the notes that I wrote about it. It's an $800 tax per gun. And then, of course, there are other things like you have to register with the federal government, have to tell them where it's at. It's going to go into a database that other people, your neighbors, everybody else can see and gain access to. But the first thing that hit me right there is an $800 tax per gun. So there might be some people watching this video that think that you and I are crazy if we have 5 guns sitting over in the closet or in a safe or whatever else, because they may think that sounds like a lot. I personally don't think that. I think 5 guns is too little, but I think that's kind of your starter kit for an American. You know what I mean? But let's say that you've got the 5 guns, okay? Times $800 is $4,000, Narren. Now let's say that I inherit my great uncle's collection and he has 12.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now 12 times $800.
$9,600.
So now I've got to do this annually. I've got to ante up that $800 per gun annually. Now, we're talking about people, Narren, that we're talking about a good portion of this state, if not across America, that have a darn hard time paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, for sure.
Where are you going to come up with all that extra money?
You're not. And I'm not very familiar with HR. You're not very familiar with HR 127. I just kind of Googled it while you were talking about it, and I really couldn't read it while you were listening. So I'm going to stipulate that your understanding of it is correct, right? Like I have no reason to not trust you, but I do think it's important to say to our audience that I haven't read the bill.
So my question to you that I want you to chase is, if Joe Blow can't come up with thousands and thousands and thousands to ante up for this new tax, and where well-to-do people can, and then there are many of us that can't, what happens next? Because there are two paths there. So tell me what you think.
I think first of all, I want to say, I think any form of gun regulation, or historically in our country, all forms of gun regulation have been disproportionately and negatively felt, right, by poor people and people of color, right? You can trace that history. I mean, you can go back to 1640 when Virginia wrote its first laws on how Black people couldn't own weapons, right? But like, even as you move up into the Mulford Act of 1967 under Reagan, that law, right, which I always found humorous. I always find the Mulford Act humorous because Reagan was a quote-unquote Republican and a quote-unquote pro-gun president. But when he was governor, him and the NRA and Republicans and Democrats got together to restrict gun laws in California because of one group's using those gun laws, right? And we know which group that was. It was the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, who showed up at the state capitol carrying legally and openly. But after that, Reagan was quoted as saying, no reason why on the streets today a citizen should be carrying a loaded weapon. Well, I don't leave my house without one. And I'm like you, Michael. I believe that one is none, two is one, and three is better. Right? Like, so I don't leave my house without one.
Or 5 or 10 or whatever.
Right. Reagan was wrong in 67 when he said this, and he's wrong today. And so when I think about today, if you're going to, if these folks, these elected national federal politicians, right, if they think that this $800 tax, as you state, on a gun is going to stop folks that I know in Iowa who own their firearms from owning their firearms because they can't pay that registration fee, I don't think it's going to work. So what it's going to do is it's going to make it harder for poor people and people of color, because just looking at the statistics, people of color are on average more poor than their white counterparts in this country. So this is going to tax poor people and people of color. In other words, it's going to tax the most marginalized of us. And the reason why I think that's important is because the Second Amendment, as I said with Michael earlier, is designed to protect the people, to give the people a means of protection from an overreaching government, right? And if I'm a government and I want to go about subjugating people, right, then I'm going to start with the weakest of them, the marginalized of them, and I'm going to make it harder for them to have a means to protect themselves against me. And I think that's what this bill would do. And I think you're absolutely right. You can trace this bill's history to what we know is a Jim Crow racist ideology around gun legislation in the U.S.
Well, I don't disagree with any of that. Some of the problems that I've got with this beyond that, you said, I don't think it's going to work. People aren't going to pay it. They aren't going to ante up. Well, what does that actually do? Well, I believe the answer to that is that makes, let's say that you and I both agree that we don't have the money, we're not going to pay for it, and then we don't. Well, what happens to us? Well, they just come pick you up if they want to, or choose to prosecute you, or do what it is they want to do, and you become a felon. Then you can't vote. So now you can't shape any of your future in terms of the election because you have been silenced through other means. And I'm telling you, again, Now we were into this tiered justice model.
That's right.
Where if you've got money and status, you can do some things. Otherwise, we really don't want to hear from you, and we're going to go ahead and put a policy in place that we recognize that we'll never say openly in public, that actually penalizes one group of our culture, of our society, or one clique, status, rung on the ladder, whatever you want to call it. We recognize that happens, but we don't want to talk about it. So let's just hurry up and do whatever else. And then we're going to cost shift and turn this thing around and say, well, it's a safety issue. So yeah, we're going to have to go through with that because we do it for the children, whatever it is, BS that they throw in there. You laugh, Narren, I'm telling you, you've heard it for years. This is what they do. Do it for the kids.
I laugh because I agree with you. And I think the sentiment that we do it for the children is ironic. Like I'm not going to sit up here and act like there hasn't been violence in our nation that involved people using guns. Sure. But I have never seen a gun jump up and go shoot somebody by itself. So why don't we spend, like, I would prefer our elected officials, our government, to focus on the root cause, which is education, poverty, mental health. How about you spend some time focusing in those spaces and then not worry about the gun? Like my gun, like I said, I've never seen a gun jump up and shoot somebody. I'm like you. I own several. I've never had an accidental discharge.
The reason that we don't go talk about education and poverty, and what was the third thing you mentioned? Education, poverty, and mental health. Those are harder things to do. Those aren't quick blanket fixes. But by gummy, when we make a law that says that you got to pay this money, you got to do this thing, or this is the hoop you got to jump through, that's pretty cut and dried. And then what we can do is like, oh, you're welcome, constituents. I did something to ensure your safety today. Look at me, and oh, by the way, reelect me. That's exactly how that works.
And I would argue if they pass this HR 127, which, so I'm a realist too. So I think it might get out of the House. It probably will get out of the House, but it'll never get out of the Senate, right? So it's like you just said, they're doing their dog and pony show, but the whole time they're doing their dog and pony show, they make people like you and I worry.
Yeah.
Because I'm a responsible gun owner. I love the range, right? I work to get more people involved in gun ownership and learning about gun safety, because I think that's one of my duties as a citizen of this country. And I don't like to speak. I'm not here to speak for all Black people. I don't do that one. I will say when we host events, one of the things that I purposely try to challenge is this narrative in the Black communities that I have been involved with. I try to challenge this narrative that says, oh, well, we shouldn't have guns. And I'm like, why shouldn't we have guns? Like, oh, because, every time you see something on the news, it's this person doing that. I'm like, well, that was that person with the gun. It wasn't the gun. It's not the community. It's the way that person used it. So even that internalized dialogue, I think, gets into people's minds. I live up here in the northeast corner of Iowa. I have members of the Mulholland Progressive Gun Club that come from all walks of life. Of course, the name of my gun club will tell you where our political ideology might be, but there's a lot of us out here who aren't what we might call your historic gun owner, who are like, hold on, wait a minute, HR 127 is crazy. None of my friends, none of my members of the gun club are going to be looking to pay this $800. And like I said, my practical side of me says it's never going to make it out of the Senate. So it's just the sponsor, Representative Jackson Lee of Texas, is just kind of doing a show for, like, as you said, her constituents. Instead of working to fix the real problems, which I don't even know what her district's real problems are, but I can take a guess, right? Instead of fix the real problems of her district.
Well, I think that you're right about another thing that you mentioned earlier, is that how likely is HR 127 to fly through the House, fly through the Senate, and be signed by our president? I think that the likelihood of it making to the Senate is low. I'm not going to for 1 minute think that it can't happen, because every time I'm sure of something, I find out how wrong I am. But what I will tell you is that since this bill is so horrible and so egregious, number one, I think it's a signal of what some people actually think of us out here. And the other thing that I think it is something designed to distract. So when that's happening, what's with the right hand? How are you picking my pocket with the left? So, so I'm hearing about other bills right now, like this universal background checks and some supposed loophole close that they're claiming that they want to do. And I read yesterday that they suspended rules in the House that say that there has to be anything that goes on in the committee or subcommittee process prior to April 1st. So if you've got some sham of a bill in the state house or in the at DC in the House right now, it can go directly to eligibility for floor debate right now. So I mean, my guess is they're going to try and plaster the wall of Senate with bills and pressure to say you have to do something, and then they'll pick the least nefarious of those to push through. So I've got this feeling that HR 127 is something designed to make you and I outraged, while something that looks more reasonable comes along.
And you know, you touched on universal background checks, and I waffle. I'm going to own this one. I waffle on this one. I waffle between, okay, I can give you universal background checks, or no, it should be constitutional carry. I waffle between those two. But for me, the only thing that I find myself having space with in this gun control conversation, the only place I find myself having space to give is in the background check space. All right, you want to do universal background checks? Cool, whatever. Every time I buy a gun, it goes through my FFL, right? So like, okay, whatever. I think there's some really common sense places where that doesn't apply. Like when I pass, hopefully it won't be anytime soon, my children's going to inherit my guns, right? They should be able to inherit those without a whole lot of rigmarole. So, but yeah, that's about the only place that I can find space in. And even there, like I said, I waffle. I think I got to come back to it. I think any form of gun control is going to, at the end of the day, disproportionately and negatively impact poor people and people of color. To your original statement, where this is a holdover from Jim Crow, and it is showing itself. I mean, so in preparation for this conversation, I actually did some research, a little research, and I came across this article from 2019 put out by the Minnesota Journal of Law. So, and the short version of the story is that a mayoral candidate for St. Paul in 2017 had his house broken into, and they took 2 guns that were in a lockbox from his house. And those 2 guns were handed down to the mayoral candidate from his father. Now, the mayoral candidate of St. Paul at this time was a black man. And the folks running against him ran an article, right, that said, since his guns were stolen, there's been 100 shots fired. There was no connection between those shots and his guns. They were just using that imagery of the dangerous black man to put forth this message of both guns are bad and black folks with guns are bad, right? They were playing on this racist trope type thing. Now, in his defense, they came out and they defended that and called the article and the attack ad the BS that it was. But the very fact is that ad worked with some people. It worked with some liberals. It worked with some conservatives, right? That type of thinking is why we still have these conversations, I think, about this whole basics of gun control. Because you can put an image in someone's face and say, oh, be scared of them. And that's why no one should have that, because you should be scared of them. And I'm like, I sleep well at night. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying I'm fearless, because that's not the case at all, or that I'm not scared of anyone. That's not the case at all. I know I sleep well at night because I can defend my household with the most effective tool necessary, right? Maybe that defense of my household is a fire extinguisher. They're in my household too, right? Yeah. But I'm not going to give up the fire extinguisher, just like I'm not going to give up the gun, because at some point in time, one tool might be better than the other to defend my household. And I want to have the most effective means to defend myself, my family, and my household at my disposal at any time I want. Like, that's what I want. I think I want that for you too. I want that for your listeners. Like, I want that for all of us.
If your position that you had just stated is reasonable, and I happen to think that it is, and I don't even like using the word reasonable because people use that against you now, as if you have an idea that they're not proposing and they claim that theirs is reasonable. That means yours autonomously isn't. So I don't even like saying that, but let's agree for the purpose of this conversation that we're pretty reasonable guys. All right. Mm-hmm. If what you said is reasonable, and I think it is, and I think you would be universally understood as reasonable, then why is it that the laws that we see pushed, enacted, and pieces of legislation right here in this state, this isn't just a federal problem. I am looking at a litany of crap bills that keep getting put forth by the same legislators in this state of Iowa year after year after year. If that's the case, then why do they do this? Are they this disconnected or what?
That's a tough question. In general, I think people like to kick down.
Like to do what?
Right? Kick down. I'm borrowing some terminology from a guy I don't know, but I listen to. His name is Bo of the Fifth Column. Bo of the Fifth Column. We want to, you were talking about it when you were like, we want to hold people down, right? Instead of lift people up. And so if you have power or money or resources, you think someone else getting power or resources is going to take from your power or resources. But that's not it. It's not a zero-sum game, right? But we want to keep down. And some of these legislators, I'm not familiar with the ones in Iowa. Some of these legislators are in districts. I'm familiar with mine, right? But not all of them in Iowa. Some of these legislators have districts that are super like, their district is like, I want you as whatever representative from whatever district in Iowa to go there and write laws to get rid of guns. Okay, great. If you're doing that because that's what your constituency wants, fine. But if you're doing that for some corporation to maintain some power balance between the haves and the have-nots, that you think the have-nots are one day going to get all together and come take yours, I think you're missing the point of the Second Amendment in general. I think you're missing the point of why I carry everywhere I go. It's not because I'm out to take something from you. I'm there, and everybody I know that carries, they're not out to take anything. They're out to defend themselves. They're out for their day, and they see a gun as one of the most effective means to do that, to defend themselves with. They have no desire to use it.
This is not about that, though. This conversation and these components transcend simply tools for the job. Now, I concede that that's what they are, and that's the way that they should be framed. I agree with you. But I'm telling you, Narren, that this is a matter of trust. These folks walk down the road, and they can't handle that you might have a gun or I that might have a gun. That's a problem for them, and they can't wrap their mind around whatever else. And the reason is it's not anything to do with you. It's not anything to do with me. It's how they can't handle what they think. Right. This is truly their problem up here, but they put this problem on you and I because they can't handle it through other means. So if I'm looking at our website right now, iowafc.org, and I'm looking under legislative victories, and already this year defeated was HF 65, which is House File 65, and it's a rollback from shall issue, which Iowa has today, to may issue. And when I see may issue, all I see is Jim Crow, because that's what it is. Yes. So where somebody can say, you know what? I don't think I like this guy having a gun. He's got a pumpkin pie haircut. His buddy has an earring. He's not the right color. She's not the right sex. This guy doesn't vote for me. I know he's never going to. These are all reasons why people have been denied in the past under may issue. And the prop for that is as well. What if there's been a domestic dispute out there 18 times and our officers have been called? Well, you can still put in a denial for shall issue today in our current law. You just have to actually cite the reasons why, rather than saying, well, I'm the sheriff of my jurisdiction. I know what's going on with my citizens, all 185,000 of them. I know, you know what I mean? But that bill, House File 65, was filed again this year. It was filed last year, the year before that. We're talking about 12 years in a row since we have had shall issue in the state. That bill has been filed by the same 4 or 5 people.
And I think that's ridiculous. I've been a fan of IFC for a while. And when we first started talking, I was like, yeah, I know who you are. Like, what I say is, I think it's ridiculous. I think I don't know these 4 or 5 people that keep filing, right? I'm guessing it's either their district is really anti-gun or they're carrying some national party line, right? Or some state party line.
Or they're funded by people who want this.
Right. Or they're funded by people who want this. And it's like, I do have some faith in Iowa, and I do think that things aren't absolute, but I think every time they file this is going to continue to get denied or shut down or die in committee or wherever, because there's too many folks like me who will cross a party line to vote for the sheriff I like, right? Who will cross a party line to vote for the politician I think will do best. And I'm not going to sit up and say that this is one of my that 2A is a trigger issue for me, but it's one that I look at very closely. Like, I want to know what your record is on 2A, especially in this space of when you start thinking about the shall versus may, because as you just pointed out, the shall gives you hardly any discretion, right? You can document it and show cause, and I can get down with cause. If you got cause to say that Joe Blow or Jane Doe has mental health issues or they beat their children or whatever, I can get down with cause for restricting their right. What I can't get down with is because you felt like it. I can't support that. Not with my finances, not with my vote, not with my voice. I just can't support that because you felt like it. Because oh, what you deemed this person in their career as more valuable, and therefore you let them carry a gun, but this person in their career you said was less valuable, right? Like that's what I think is happening in that May conversation. Somebody was making a value judgment.
That's right.
And we talked about this before we started recording. Everybody's values are different.
That's right. Value. I've had this discussion with a lot of people, Narren. Your values, my values. What does that really mean? We could remove the word value and insert opinion. It's the same thing at that point. Your opinion, my opinion. So what does that mean? We both draw a line in the sand. You're not wanting to cross it any more than I am. So where do you go from there? There's no true progress that can be made when you start talking about value statements or opinion statements.
That's right.
Because of the line in the sand. It's there whether we agree with it or not. So instead of that, we should be saying what allows Iowans to flourish in terms of the Second Amendment. What allows these people or us, whatever you want to phrase it, what allows these people maximum liberty? What allows the most freedom universally? Those are the kinds of questions we need to ask and answer. And so if we apply shall issue or may issue, which one allows me to have more trust in you as a fellow Iowan? Which one is better for the populace? Now we're asking the right questions in the right way, because may issue starts to look pretty crappy pretty fast, and shall issue is pretty darn good. Okay, that's kind of where I'm at on this stuff. And
I'm with you, and I can even see. I have no evidence for this. I'm just kind of spitballing. I could see if may issue came back, I could see a sheriff saying, oh, well, this area of whatever city is really dangerous and I don't want any more guns in that area. And therefore denying a law-abiding citizen their constitutional right because of their address.
I know. Think about how messed up this is. So you've got Joe Criminal out here who didn't ask permission to get his gun and go create acts of crime, whatever else. And then you've got someone that says, I'm raising my hand and I'm going to, even though I know better, I'm a freeborn American. I know that. Even though I know better, I'm going to go ask for permission from somebody so that he may or may not say yes. Think about what that does to us. That's demoralizing.
It
You
keeps
should
us
never
down.
put yourself in a position of power over somebody for the purposes of taking something from them. I don't care whether you're a politician, whether you're running an advocacy group, it doesn't make any difference. Good leaders don't put themselves in positions to take from others.
I totally agree. I mean, I totally agree. I think, you know, some of these things for me go back to like some of my school age, the thought process I was taught at the school age. We should be lifting each other up, not putting each other down.
Right.
Many hands make light work, right? Like, so why would we want to kick down when the world is so much better when everybody's being lifted? But I think it gets into that whole idea. Like we started this conversation about Jim Crow, so let's go one step further with the shall issue versus the may issue, right? Well, okay. Now, what if it's a poor area in southern Iowa that's mostly white, right? I mean, I know we can see that playing out maybe in a rough area in Waterloo that's mostly black, but the same latitude that gives that sheriff in, say, Black Hawk County the ability to discriminate in who they give right to carry or the license to carry to applies to all poor people. Just like this HR 127 bill, it's going to apply to all poor people equally. So if you don't have the resources, and if it happens to pass, and you don't have the resources, you, as you aptly pointed out, you just became a criminal if you don't turn in your firearms. And then that cycle of criminalization, lack of participation in the franchise to vote, that becomes a cycle. So now you're paying taxes without representation, and that one confuses the hell out of me because we fought that one once.
Well, you'd like to think so, because what happens then, you're void your firearms, you're a felon, so you can't vote. Now, I mean, for lack of saying it any other way, you've become a second-class citizen. You're basically a drone or a worker bee in the hive. I've got to tell you, that sounds like a very bleak outlook in a country that's supposed to be the freest in the world.
Sometimes I really think that those in power, I'm not saying all those in power, but that moneyed political class, they don't want equals. I'm not saying I'm not saying that about all of them. I'm saying some of them just don't want equals. Some of these businesses, some of these corporate leaders, they don't want to empower their employees, their citizens. And so why not use the strength of the laws to help continue to subjugate and oppress groups of people? Because otherwise you'd be living in a nation of equals, which is something that I really could dig.
Right. Well, just a side story, and we probably better get towards the end of this, because you and I talked about this. We're going to chase rabbits, and so that's why we're going to have a series of these videos, not just one. But when I started, in full disclosure, I have an FFL. I have a small arms manufacturing business, and I've had lots of people come to me and ask for me to help them get their federal firearms licenses, and I have done that every single time. I've walked them through the whole thing, even given them copies of legal documents and things, and showed them where to go to get your business license, how to file, get an LLC. This is a good lawyer for this, blah blah blah, that kind of thing. And I have met with some pretty sharp criticism from friends and family that have said, why are you helping future competitors? And I'm like, well, it's been my experience that if you discourage somebody that comes to you for help, they may get the guts and the nerve to overcome and go do that anyway. And they're going to remember when they get there, I went to that guy for some help and he absolutely refused it. No, for no other reason than he didn't want to see me be successful. Number one, I don't want to be that person. I can't be that person. And number two, I want to believe, which hasn't always admittedly been the case, but I want to believe that when they do arrive, if they do arrive, they're going to remember that and say, yeah, Joe Blow customer, I'm not able to do for you what it is you ask, but I know a guy that I would trust that I could refer you to. And I'm telling you, Narren, more people have walked in my business that have said, I talked to such and such down the road, and he said that you're the guy I should visit with. This isn't something he does, but you could help me. I want to believe that boomerang has come back a lot of times. And that's the way that we should be treating one another. It doesn't have anything to do specifically with referrals and building businesses. It has to do with how I'm willing to treat you as a stranger that I don't know anything about when I see on the street versus something else. So when a politician says, no, I don't trust you, I won't trust you, and I'm going to prove to you that because I want to take from you your rights and your liberties, your civil rights. I want to take them and curtail them and marginalize them into May issues so that I can make decisions on how I think that you are. I know that that's wrong, and I'm not going to go for it. Nobody should. I mean,
I'm with you.
I mean, representing the well-armed progressive and me are two things that you probably wouldn't find in the same sentence very often. But I'm telling you, and I know that you know this, I'm telling people listening, the Second Amendment transcends that. This is individual and it's for everybody. It's your right. Period.
And I would urge you all to practice your right, right? And not allow Iowa to do anything crazy like revert back to May issue. Just for there's many more reasons than what Michael and I have talked about. But do your own research. But I think both of us have presented some fairly good ones of how badly it could go quickly. And the caveat here is that some of these examples that we've used of how badly it could go are based on the way it was 12 years ago. Right. So like we're using historical examples of like what some sheriffs did to talk about why we shouldn't go back to that type of practice around who could carry weapons.
Right. Okay, so do this for me. Wrap this out. Tell everybody what the well-armed progressive is one more time, and then we'll switch over, and I'll lead everybody out. But I want everybody to know Narren was kind enough to come on today so that we could visit, and he's also agreed, assuming you're still in for this, to do a series of these.
Yes.
Because we have a lot of conversations that we need to have, and where there's a lot of rabbits that we have left to chase. So to finish this out with what's going on with the well-armed progressive.
So again, I'm Narren Brown. I'm the president and founder of the well-armed-progressive.com. I started the Well-Armed Progressive because I love to go to the range, and I never saw any apparel that reflected me. And sometimes I saw apparel that was downright offensive. Right. So I was like, well, I'm not going to stop going to the range. I'm just going to find my own gear to wear. And when I couldn't find my own gear to wear, I decided, well, I guess I'll start designing it and hopefully sell it. And you don't have to go to my website. You have to buy any of my stuff. That's not what I'm saying. But it's why I started the company. It snowballed, or it has grown into now the well-armed-progressive.com. There's the Well-Armed Progressive Gun Club, which is a registered state chapter of the National African American Gun Association, NAGA, which I am a proud member of.
Me too.
I think there are a lot of, on a side note, there are a lot of gun rights organization out there. I would say find the one that fits your ideology the best and go with it, because one of the things they're going to all have in common is a staunch support in defense of the Second Amendment. Yeah. So
fantastic. I found NAGA a little under a year ago, and I think at that time they didn't even have, or they were just budding into an Iowa chapter. Are there two now?
There are two now.
Yeah. All right, that's fantastic. That should be a topic. We should talk about that. So, Michael Ware, chairman of the Iowa Firearms Coalition. I almost forgot who I was for a minute. I remembered now. And I usually don't ask for this, but I've got to tell you, we're working very hard at the Iowa Firearms Coalition. The volunteers are taking it home every day, every night, and it matters when you join us. And I don't believe that it's inappropriate to ask for a donation, and I certainly don't believe that it's inappropriate to ask for your membership. So consider that, and we'll leave you with that until next time. Narren, let's make a point to do this very soon. I don't want this to go several weeks or a month. Let's see if we can circle back very quick.
All right, I'm game.
All right.
Thank you for having me, Michael. Much appreciated.